Right, hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to this episode of Chrysalis on the Couch. And joining me today is Amy and Rhianan. And if you, hopefully you are already subscribed to our YouTube channel, but if not, then do please feel free to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We have lots of interesting discussions on this channel on a regular basis. And today we are going to be talking specifically about the topic of movies. And we're all movie fans here. Movies that we love, movies that inspire us, and why that happens, why we feel that they're inspiring us. So Amy is joining us. Amy is a student with Chrysalis. Is that right, Amy?
Yeah, I'm a year 3 student and just finishing up my final studies and loving the course.
Great, that's great to hear, and great that you're here as well. And Rhianan is also joining us. And Rhianan, you are a tutor with Chrysalis?
Yeah, so I teach Bristol and Reading at the moment. So yes, Chrysalis tutor and counsellor in my own practice and supervisor and lots of other hats that comes with being a counsellor.
Right, brilliant, yes. And loving it all?
Yes, yeah, it's really hard to know which one. Somebody asked me yesterday, which one do you like the most? And I'm not sure one works well without the other. So probably all of it.
Yeah, and I know what you mean there. It's like, so you know, I also tutor for Chrysalis, and I also have a private practice and supervise, and you know, maybe that's something that will come out in our theme today. So you know, talking about movies, perhaps one of the things that we love about movies is the variety of, you know, that they bring, and you know, how they can help us to have different perspectives on things. You know, perhaps that's something that, you know, that we personally feel drawn to in terms of, well, I like variety in my life and I like to be able to put different hats on, and maybe movies can sort of help us to sort of, you know, move towards that. So where should we start? What do we think? So Amy, what is, you know, what kind of movies do you love?
So, well, for me, I have to say it's the adventure superhero style movies. So Marvel, Justice League. My favorite is Wonder Woman and has been for a while. I love that. And I think actually what you just said, Lorna, about us going into different roles, I think that maybe is one of the parts of it that I love so much, you know, just stepping into another role, something that you could never normally do in your life, and just being part of that. I love that. I love the adventure, I love the fantasy, and I love getting lost in like that magical side. That really draws me in to all of those kind of movies.
Yeah, that getting lost, you know,
Yeah.
I love that as well. Sort of, you know, so, you know, being able to really absorb yourself, and, you know, which is the same as, you know, as we can do with books. But,
Yeah.
you know, there is just so much information, such a richness with movies, isn't there?
Yeah.
So do you find the same thing, Rhiannon?
I think I've probably got a mixed taste of things. So I can watch a romance, a rom-com. It depends what mood I'm in, a comedy. But yeah, I like action. There's not many genres that I don't like, but I'm an MCU fan, so Marvel MCU fan, absolutely. And I was also thinking as Amy was talking then about the investment in the characters as well, and especially like MCU obviously spanned, I know the Marvel comics are older, but MCU spanning across like 10 years, and the investment and the build up and the whole picture that then comes to a culmination, and the people we lose along the way, and it's like an investment in some way, which is quite interesting. I was thinking that just as you were talking then.
Yes, very interesting, isn't it? And I mean, one of the things that we were just, you know, we were just chatting about briefly earlier is, you know, how we can, you know, how we can understand movies and use the themes and the characterization in movies for our therapy work as well. And that you mentioned, Rhiannon, perhaps something that we can bring in a little bit later that is related to cinema therapy. So, you know, maybe we can chat about that a bit later.
Yeah.
So you like lots of different genres.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think when I think about sort of growing up, I remember sort of watching films like Amistad, And also, I don't know if you heard the John Grisham A Time to Kill. I remember watching that sort of in my teen years, and there's certain aspects of that it kind of really gets you to understand. You won't understand, obviously, but to get some glimpse into the gravity of human, or when people aren't human, and things really, you know, the way people treat each other across generations, and who kind of I would want to be. So if I lived in those times, I would like to think I was going to be somebody that stood out and helped people and things like that. So there's something that came about that around, you know, justice. And A Time to Kill, I won't sort of spoil it, but there's definitely a bit in a court case where he asks all the jurors to close their eyes, and he tells a story, and then he says, and now imagine that this person's white, and they all just go, like, it stuns them. So there's key points, I think you said earlier, there's key points that sometimes there's just that moment, and it's like, whoa, that's, you know. So I think I had a lot of sense of justice and wanting to be on the right side of justice growing up, actually, through movies, interestingly.
Yeah, that's you know, that's something that feels so powerful. And you know, it reminds me of some research that I was reading about just the other day, which was related to therapy. And the research was saying that over 40% of clients report that actually they have a key moment within therapy where everything changes. And you know, and that key moment comes, you know, quite precisely. It's not something that starts to build over time, you know, session by session. So you know, quite often people can realize something either in a therapy session or between therapy sessions, come back to the next session saying, you know, I've had some kind of, well, they probably wouldn't describe in terms of had some kind of cognitive shift or something, but that's what's occurred. Something has, you know, a light bulb moment. And you know, for me, you know, movies that I really love always have those light bulb moments in them in quite significant ways. So you know, one of my favorite movies is Strictly Ballroom, and there's this key light bulb moment in the middle of that, which I won't disclose in case anybody hasn't seen it and now feels that they might like to, but it's a really, really important moment that changes everything. And there's another movie as well, which is It's All Gone Pete Tong, which is about a DJ in Ibiza who loses his hearing. And again, there's a really significant light bulb moment in that, which changes everything for him. And I just love that. I just love that. You know, so you know, that's where I am, I think, with movies. You know, love those moments, and you know, can link that to therapy. But there's lots of ways that we can kind of link movies to therapy, isn't there?
Yeah, and I guess it depends on our own experience as well, because I have an experience of what that was like for me when I had my therapy. And for me, you know, it actually goes towards this more, it opened up something much lighter, and it actually linked into faith as well for me, almost finding that part of myself. And so when I'm watching films, I'm drawn to sort of almost like the more childlike ones, you know, Disney films. The one, as you were talking there, the one I was thinking of the most was Frozen 2. When Elsa kind of goes into this cave and she finds herself, she realizes who she is, and she has this, you know, what we could call a cognitive shift or some kind of awakening. And, you know, it's a really pivotal moment of the film. And I think that, you know, our experiences, both as people and as therapists, will, you know, play into what we're drawn to watching based on our perspectives and our experiences as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? To actually recognize that watching movies is part of our experience.
Yeah.
And therefore part of our memories.
And I suppose how that can change at any given time. So I think in therapy, yes, absolutely, there's a penny drop moment, but there's sometimes also client work where you've said things before and you've been through things before, but there's just a day where it's heard and it wasn't heard before. And actually, I find that when I'm watching, if I watch something again more than once, I tend to see things I didn't see the first time, or something resonates more that I didn't resonate a different day. And whether that's my experience has changed, or I've just seen it differently, or I'm in a different place. So maybe there's that kind of aspect to it as well. I can watch something 12 times and I'll find something new in it that I didn't see the first 11 times.
Yeah, that's true.
Fascinating, isn't it? So it's, you know, and shows, you know, not just the work that goes into producing movies and those different layers of themes and plot and so on and so on, but perhaps all the unconscious things that people never realize are going into what it is that they're creating there. So, you know, I mean, I'm sure that there are, you know, movies such as uh, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and those, you know, those movies where you can kind of identify all of the Jungian archetypes, for example, that are definitely there. And I'm sure with movies like that, you know, that was either deliberate or at least kind of unconsciously deliberate. It's like, okay, so there's the wise old man, and there's the hero, and there's the child, and so on and so on. But I would imagine that there are less obvious movies that are also sort of, you know, bringing in all of these unconscious aspects, not even realizing that's happening, and we're kind of picking that up then as different layers as we see more into the movie.
I do always wonder that when I'm thinking about the movie, and I'm thinking, who's written this? You know, are they a counselor? You know, how have they got all of this knowledge? And I think actually it's probably completely unconscious, and something is drawing them to that, you know, driving them to create that piece. It's a, you know, creation from inside of them, isn't it? But I do find myself questioning, like, I wonder what this person does, or, you know, what they've learned or where they've been. It's a real good insight into the writer or the director.
And maybe a real good insight into, you know, Jung's idea of the collective unconscious. And, you know, one of the reasons why we love movies is because it does link into that. It's the, you know, it's the modern storytelling. So, you know, although there are still movies that show, you know, traveling storytellers who go from place to place and to village, but, you know, the modern storytelling and that's linking in to something that we kind of already know.
Yeah, we all recognize, even if we don't recognize it consciously, we something inside of us goes, oh, that means something, or that helps me to feel something. And if that's actually something we haven't talked about, is the feeling that movies give us, because surely that's one of the biggest reasons we do it, is because of the way that we feel when we're watching them.
Yeah. And I mean, I would have to say that, you know, I admit I am not a fan of scary movies. So, you know, I can just remember seeing, you know, a couple of scary movies when I was young that just like, I never want to have this feeling again. But that's just me. But, you know, clearly it's a really popular genre, and a lot of people absolutely love to be completely terrified.
I'm fascinated by that, actually. And I don't mind things that are jumpy. I have got a friend, and we go to the cinema, and she'll jump even if someone's just opened a door. She's so jumpy. It's quite funny to sit by her in something that's not actually even jumpy. She still jumps. I don't mind things that are scary. Like, I like psychological thrillers. That's probably one of my favorites. I like real psychological thriller type of things, like Gone Girl or things like that. Those are quite, you know, like, that's what's got my brain going. But I don't like, and I know where it comes from, I can't watch anything if it's got demons or that kind of genre. And it's because I had a very, very religious upbringing. And so whereas I'm not religious now, I'm not actively belonging to any religion, I think that's so deeply inbuilt to stay away from anything that's got the devil or demons in. I just don't touch that genre, which is interesting because it's not sort of a belief system I hold anymore, but that's still quite ingrained in me to be like, no, not go in there.
Yeah,
I'm the same, actually. I'm the same. So, you know, I didn't have a really strictly religious upbringing, but was definitely brought up within a family where, you know, religion was important to the adult members. There's just something very, very deep there. I agree. I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. Even though I would say that I don't believe that such things exist. That's almost a kind of avoidance belief. If I don't believe that those such things exist, so therefore I won't go near anything that shows that they might.
Just in case.
Just in case, yeah.
I feel exactly the same. I have watched a few movies when I was young, was absolutely terrified, and decided I can't do that to myself. And it wasn't related to religion, because I wasn't brought up in a religious family. I've found my own faith moving forward as I've grown up, but that wasn't the part of it for me. I was just absolutely terrified by it, of what, as a child, I'm thinking, could this be? And I still see in my life now, I'm questioning the same things in movies. Could this be? What is this? But back then I had absolutely no grounding or foundation. I was a terrified little child watching this film, and I think I stayed in my parents' bed for a week after I watched, I think it was The Exorcist I watched.
Oh my goodness. that's one to definitely put you off for life.
Yeah, but I have found actually that as I've got older, I can see things now on the TV and they won't completely terrify me. I'll note it and go, oh no, I don't want to watch that. But it's not quite the same absolute dread as it was when I was younger.
Yeah, I find the same thing, Amy. I've never seen The Exorcist, and I actively avoid it. So if I see that it's being shown on a TV channel, I'd be like, nope.
Yeah.
And I think that I've also learned to step back and to look at some of those scary moments in a different way. And almost sort of analyze. It's like, no, that's just that's not people's body parts, that's rice pudding and mashed potatoes coloured, and
yeah
which hopefully it is. To really kind of, yes, sort of detach from it emotionally. But then, of course, there's all those better emotions, aren't they? That those inspiring, joyful, sad but beautiful moments that movies bring forth as well.
Yes, definitely. And again, it reminds me, and I've literally just saw, well, we're going to see Fast and Furious this week. So that's kind of like, I don't care what happens in that. They can jump from planet to planet and I'm going to believe that it's possible. That's okay. And then sometimes I find like the film, you kind of, it's a sad film. And I mean, I went to go and see The Father. It was a Saturday night, one of the first things I've seen since lockdown. I don't know if it was a good choice, but it was a brilliant film. But it's not a happy film. It's about dementia, and it's about the decline in the person's mindset, and seeing it from their point of view. And it's not a happy ever after. And I do think those films are important, but you have to be in the right mood. And I also find, if I don't know if sometimes you can cry, and sometimes you need a cry and you can't quite cry. So I go and see something like that to cry my eyes out, and it really helps. So sometimes I think, I need to go and see something really, really sad so I can just have a flush out of a good cry. So it's interesting how that can be really helpful.
Yes. Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? So do you find the same thing, Amy?
Do you know what? I think I do it on a more unconscious level. So what I usually find is, if I do need to have a good cry and I can't, normally I'll end up finding something to watch that creates that in me and does the same job. I might not be looking for it, but usually I find it.
Yeah, I think the same thing. And of course, can always also do this. It's like, okay, put on a happy film if we're just feeling that life is being a bit mundane, and that we need to kind of link into something just joyful and cheerful and fun. Again, if life feels a bit mundane, it's like, all right, well, what about something inspirational? And perhaps that's where the idea of what cinema therapy has come from, that actually it does help us to link into our emotions. So that's something that that you know a little bit more about, Rhianan.
So there's definitely, as we're talking, there's something about checking in. Like, if maybe you've had a breakup, you might not want to watch a lovely love affair film or something. So it's interesting what we choose to check in with, and what we're like, no, I can't look at that today, I'm not in that place to look at that. So that's quite interesting with cinema and with films. But cinema therapy is maybe not exactly as it sounds. So what this is it's two people, and you can literally go on Instagram or YouTube and just put cinema therapy, and it's a US therapist and his friend's a filmmaker, and what they do is they sit and they will watch a film. So they've done Inside Out, they've done Tangled, Disney Tangled, they've done Joker. So they do lots of different films, and then what they'll do is they'll just have a discussion about it with each other. I mean, sometimes I watch things, as probably you do as well, and especially if it's fictional, you're like, that's not what counsellors do, that's not what therapists do, I don't agree with that. And we're like a chef in a restaurant, sometimes I'm like that when I watch things with counsellors in. But I have to say, the therapist, as he was talking and saying, so this character, when they're doing that, that's this, and he talks through sort of the dynamics of the characters and how that's playing out, and how actually that's emotionally abusive, and how, and it's really, and I'm nodding away when I'm watching it, because I really agree with the stuff that he says, and I find it fascinating. So I'll definitely encourage to watch it. And again, the Joker, you know, this is something I know we were going to talk about as well, that kind of the thing that we have, that good, that evil, and growing. And I suppose that's very Disney, isn't it? Like the villain and the good person. And I think those things are starting to shift a bit, that we actually have, let's have a backstory. I mean, it's never that certain things are okay in behavior, but the backstory and getting empathy for a character of actually how did they become like this, which again is a huge part of what we do in therapy. It's like, where did this come from? The psychodynamic work of where was this born? Where does this self-defeating behavior come from? And I find that quite fascinating in cinema these days. There's empathy. The villains are no longer villainized as much, which is really interesting, I find.
Yeah, one of the films I really loved is Maleficent, because I watched that as a young child of, you know, Sleeping Beauty, heard all of the stories, but actually when I watched Maleficent and how they went back and they showed what happened to her, you know, and then you've got your empathy there, and you can actually see, well, no wonder this person is behaving in this way. You know, it's not okay, but no wonder. Look what's happened to her. Yeah.
So and I was just thinking, as you were just talking there, Rhianan, about, you know, developmental stages, and, you know, those kind of early psychodynamic stages that that Melanie Klein talks about, in terms of, you know, good or bad, everything being divided into good or bad, and how later on we hope that we can soften the edges of that very early decision that we make. And we know that sometimes that's hard, and we still know that a lot of movies very clearly sort of, you know, put in the good, the bad. It's like, okay, we're on this side of the war, and we're on the right side of the war, and that's the wrong side of the war. That, as you say, that's beginning to soften. And I think that, you know, maybe that's also beginning to soften in those types of war movies as well, where it's like, okay, so we're talking about human beings here. We're not talking about us and the enemy. We're talking about real people and how real people respond. And you know, we can almost look at that as, you know, a developmental stage that that we move into. So and there's, it's like therapy, isn't it? There's so much depth that we can go into if we want to, and if we have the space to do so.
And that's what movies do, I think, as well. It's very different to life, in the, say we hear even a headline in a newspaper, we only have the headline. And what a movie does is it will show you this person's part of the story, it will show you this person's part of the story. And that's something we don't have, even in the therapy room, we don't have that. We only have what's presented by the person in front of us. And so in the movies, like, somebody could come in and say, right, this person's done this to me. In real life, and we're like, oh, that's terrible, how horrible is that person, or how, you know, and we just sort of take it at face value. We don't have any context or anything like that. In the movies, we get to see maybe what led up to something. And again, this, you know, this is not a prerequisite for being abusive behavior being okay or anything like that. I don't want that to be misunderstood, but empathy of how someone, you know, maybe made a choice that on the outside we might not have made, but with a backstory where I can see now why they made that choice. Which we get in the movies and we don't get in real life.
And in more and more movies now, and even, you know, Netflix series, we're seeing not just the story play out in the present, we're seeing more and more it dipping back to show different elements of the past, to show this is where this is linked from. And, you know, that's also so relevant to the therapy room. You know, what happens in that movie, and going back and dipping in and out and looking at the links, that's also the journey of the client as well.
Yes, and I wonder, you know, that just brings to mind, you know, movies like Pulp Fiction, for example, where there are all these sort of, you know, interconnected stories that doesn't just follow one storyline, but you have to kind of juggle in your head the different storylines and how they're all coming together there. And, you know, I mean, I guess that's what we have to do in our own minds as well. That, you know, we're always living in several different stories that sometimes connect, sometimes are completely separate. And, you know, and this idea that, you know, not are we only not the same person all the time, but we're almost, what is it too far to say that we're living in different realities at the same time? And actually our time watching a movie is also living in a different reality at that time as well.
We're in different modes, aren't we? But, you know, we're in counselor mode, we're in parent mode, we're in I'm just going to be a slob and watch a movie mode. And we all have, and I suppose that goes back to Carl Jung again. Is like, you know, Carl Jung, the huge aspect of what we talked about earlier was like shadows and those pieces of ourselves we might not be conscious, but as well, kind of linking that with Carl Jung and Carl Rogers, is knowing all of those things and still being a whole person. And actually, it's okay that we even contradict ourselves internally sometimes. That's okay. We're all of these things. We're not just that or that, which is that's an interesting thing to learn about ourselves in relation to movies, actually. There's something actually that's kind of coming up for me around that bit about perspective, of seeing different pieces of a story from different points of view. Again, in life we don't have that, and I think that's something I've learned in my own life. It's about making judgments, or rather not making judgments, when we weren't there, or we don't know all aspects of a situation, and that can be very difficult, because, you know, we can sometimes end up maybe taking sides with somebody, and it can make it harder for other people. But actually, if we weren't there and we don't have all the perspective, I think we need to be careful of our judgments, and that's just something that I take from that, actually, is that sometimes I won't know, and I wasn't there when something happened. And so what's the piece where I'm rushing to a judgment of someone being good or bad, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely something to reflect on, isn't it? And how, you know, so very often all we have is an experience of a moment and no context of that at all. And, you know, we can, you know, we live in the context of our own lives, and movies have opened up such a richness there of other possibilities. So, you know, so I think I've been fortunate that I've been able to travel quite a lot, you know, especially if, you know, what the pandemic means is that, you know, it'll be a long time before any of us can really get back to traveling again in the same way, if ever. But, you know, but I've seen a lot more movies of a lot more places that I've never been to, and, you know, just a lot more, you know, how people are living in different environments and different places within different cultures and so on. And there's something there that can just, it's a real knowledge expander. And okay, again, it may be a snapshot and it may be a complete fantasy, but it is, you know, it is still being able to immerse ourselves into something other than what we're ordinarily used to.
Yeah.
Open our eyes, can't it, to other people's perspective and other people's realities that we might not have seen before. You know, until we had TVs, we wouldn't have known what that was. So we can really immerse ourselves in other people's lives.
Yeah. And their environments as well. And, you know, just seeing an amazing place and thinking, wow, you know, that place exists.
Yeah. There's a sort of suspending of ourselves in that. And again, it reminds me a little bit of empathy in the room, of where in empathy, we don't lose ourselves and to the other person, but we suspend ourselves to be with somebody for a certain amount of time, with their perspective and pain for a certain amount of time, which reminds me of just this bit here, because actually we can experience other cultures on television and customs and context, and we can be with that and hold that and sort of, you know, experience the richness of that, but then we can also still be ourselves. So we don't have to lose that. So that's kind of popped into my head then, of that interesting way of holding, you know, that we're all allowed to be different and we're all allowed to have our ways of being.
Yes. And I was just wondering, it's like, okay, so, you know, then allowing ourselves to immerse ourselves into what is happening there, unfolding on the screen. So who would we want to be?
Mm.
Mm. Thor's wife, please.
Oh no, me too.
I got in first.
Oh, who would you want to be?
I'll let you go first, Amy.
Oh, well, the one that sprang to mind was Wonder Woman. I mentioned her earlier, but I wouldn't want to be, she is completely self-sacrificing. She has sacrificed her life to save others. She's also an eternal being, which doesn't sound very good to me, not in this lifetime. But she sprang to mind. She was the first person that I thought of. But that's maybe what one part of me would like, and that probably plays into why I'm also training to be a counsellor, is to be able to do that piece where I'm helping others and not rescuing, but helping them to rescue themselves. And so that's probably one part. But the other part, there's another part of me that would look on for someone with a much lesser, not lesser, but much more maybe stable, grounded, earthly type role. Can't think of anyone at the moment off the top of my head. Come back to that if I think of anything.
Oh, I realise that I've asked a hard question there that I don't. I'll just use this opportunity to just say to our audience that if you are enjoying this, then do press that like button and do subscribe. But I think for me, Rhianan, it's not a particular character that has actually sprung to mind, but it's more if I were in in a certain lifestyle, where would that be? And the one that comes to me are some of those really warming movies where there's a lot of really sort of close and deep family connections. So I'm thinking of things like How to Make an American Quilt, and what's the other one? Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe.
That's a good film.
I mean, I know that some of those movies have some quite terrible events that happen in them and so on. But there's just something that I just really like about the strength of the family relationships that can be found in those movies, and how it's how everyone always lives in a really huge and beautiful house, and everybody is really good close friends, and and actually that feels to me like a little bit too much of a fantasy, but something that I'd love to have that around me. So another one, strangely, is The Craft. Is it The Craft? The one where the witches live together in the house, and again, it's a very kind of warm female movie, and
like Community, something about community.
Yeah.
And that someone's got your back. That sisterhood, someone's got your back. I have got a friend that always jokes, and I hope she's joking, but every time I tell her anything, she goes, "I've got a shovel in the boot, remember?" And she says it as a joke, I hope, but it's that friend that's like, "I've got your back," and I know that's what she means by it. Again, disclaimer, I hope that's what she means. But that person that's just like, just say the word, "I'm there," that feels strong, actually. Yeah. Perspective on things is that's kind of come up again, because in those stories there are things that, again, without any context on paper, would be like, right, lock them up and throw away the key. But with context, there's empathy of that's not quite clear cut. And it's something actually I use as an example to my poor students, if they don't know what I'm talking about, is in Les Miserables with Jean Valjean. So when we look at the ego, the id and the super ego, I always say, does anybody know, and Amy might know this, does anybody know Les Miserables with Jean Valjean and Javert? And you've got, so I'll explain, you've got Javert, who's like it's right or wrong, and it's the law, and that's it. And then you've got Jean Valjean, who stole a loaf of bread to feed his starving nephew and got 20 years. And there's all sorts of other things that happen there. But it's kind of like, is it, there's context to, he didn't murder somebody, he stole a loaf of bread because somebody was starving. And again, I think we get that kind of thing from films.
Yeah. I think that we are almost coming to the end of our time. So any final thoughts that you just really like to, that just spring into mind here?
I do like how things are changing, but I do have to say I do still think there's a way to go in some things. So I think there's a conscious effort, like we've said, there's a conscious effort to look at empathy for backstories. That's great. There is a conscious but minimal effort for more representation of race. There's a conscious but still minimal effort for more representation of gender and sexuality. And and I think that there's this token every now and then thing that needs to be more. So it's lovely to see that happening, but not to celebrate it too soon, because it needs to become the norm. So I'm definitely with that. And I would say, as much as I love the MCU and I love Disney, they have a responsibility to really lead the way with that. And there's still some way to go with that. That's not just insinuating something could be something, but directly having characters in those roles. Yeah, so that's probably how I would if we want an inspirational moment of this, there we go. We always look for that penny drop, so there we go.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with that. It's the power that the movie industry has as well, to be able to facilitate change, and to bring into our awareness important issues as well. And of course, the US industry in particular has been sort of quite instrumental in bringing important important factors into our awareness. But as you say, that can't peter out. That has to continue to strengthen.
And I think, as well as representation of people, the other thing that the movies does really well is give us quite a misrepresentation of relationships and how they are supposed to be, because we've, grow up watching things like Disney, and it always, or, The Notebook, it always ends when, when actually it's about to begin. It ends when the journey is about to begin, and we aren't modeled as young children actually what a relationship looks like. And so most of us grow up with a very warped idea of what an adult relationship is like. And I think if that could be incorporated into movies, especially things like Disney that children are watching, then we'll probably be a much healthier relationship society.
Yeah, that is so true, isn't it? It just takes me back to further than movies, to to fairy stories growing up. And it's like, okay, the whole happily ever after, and as you say, well, that's the starting point. That is definitely not the end. Okay. Finally, I just wondered how we feel about. I mean, for me, it's always been, a joy to go to the cinema. And as much as I really love the availability of having, movies there on my TV at home, whatever I choose to, can be purchased, downloaded anytime I want to. There's something really special, I think, about going to the cinema and having the entire experience of being absorbed by the movie. It's there, the screen is huge. I'm in darkness. It's all I'm going to do at that moment is watch the movie. My phone isn't going to ring. I haven't got to cook the dinner halfway through. It's just totally absorb yourself. And I really hope that we get back to that very soon. I don't know if you feel the same.
Yeah, I do. I love that moment, or when you kind of wake up from being in the movie, you go, oh no, actually no, I'm in the cinema. That means it was a good film.
I've got to get up now.
Yeah. I've got to get home now. But yeah, that means for me it was a good film. It was, I was fully in there, and I love that feeling of being in there with the characters and enjoying their journey.
And you're right, it is an escapism, and I think it is also a self-care. If you like movies, it could be a self-care aspect. I've got an unlimited card, So you just pay a monthly thing and you can go and see as, so that's what kind of movie fan I am. So you can go as many, and I find actually sometimes I'll book 2 or 3 films and just spend a day watching one film. Even on my own I'll go and do that. And you're right, it's just about, you know, it's just about you, which is something in itself, you and the big screen. And so I've definitely been known to have a cinema day as a self-care day, actually.
Oh, do you know, Rhiannon, I love that. And, you know, I mean, I'm going back quite a few years now as to when I used to do exactly the same thing. But you've reminded me actually of how important that is. And I don't always have to drag along my partner or, you know, say to a friend, hey, can we do this? It's like, you know, just to say, well, this is me and what I want to do today, and I'm going to choose the experience I want to have. I love that. I'm going to be inspired by that, and
Oh, good.
back into that.
Good.
Right, okay. I think we probably have to close now. I feel that we could go on and go further into the depth of this for ages and ages, but you know, unfortunately we've run out of time. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who's been watching. I hope you found that this is interesting and inspiring, and perhaps inspiring to, you know, to think a little more about this for yourselves, or indeed, you know, catch up on some of the movies that we might have mentioned here. If you're enjoying our channel, then do remember to like and to subscribe, and we hope to see you again in the future. But thanks so much from all of us. So thanks from me, and over to you, Amy. Any last words?
No, just thank you for listening. It's been really, really fun and eye-opening talking to you both. And I think I came in today thinking that we'd be talking about one thing and we've gone all into other aspects, which is lovely. I love it when that happens. So no, thank you for having me.
And Rhiannon?
Yeah, thank you. It's been lovely. It's just been, I mean, I think, like you say, we could probably talk about this all day and go and get, you know, go and grab some cocktails and finish the conversation, but we don't all live near each other, so that can't happen at the moment. But we'll put that on our to-do list for the future.
Indeed, and you know, and maybe, who knows, you know, maybe Chrysalis movies in the future, who knows?
Or maybe some cinema therapy, and we can review some films from different psychological points of view.
Oh yes, everyone watch this space. ...
Okay,
Okay, thanks everybody. See you again soon.